everyone and welcome back. Today I'm going to run you through my April wrap up. So in April I did actually have quite a bit of time off work, which made it really easy for me to read quite a lot of books this month. I had some time between the tail end of some planned leave that I had, and then also I got my wisdom teeth out. So I had a fair amount of time at home to sit down and actually read, which was really nice to do. So without further ado, I have a lot of books to talk about today, so I'm just going to jump straight in. Are you going to help me? Are you helping? So the first book that I actually completed in April was a book that I had started in March and was a bit of a rollover, and it is Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare, which is the second in the Last Hours trilogy. I believe that I may be falling out of the Cassandra Clare fandom because I was just so not into this book. I found it really hard to fall back into the story. Now this might be because I did wait the entire year for the book from the release of the last one, and I didn't read them one after another. So that may have contributed to my difficulty with getting back into the series. But I also just found that I wasn't connecting to the characters as much as I used to, and I wasn't getting as sucked in as what I know that I used to get with the Cassandra Clare books. And this is also reflected in the community. Everyone else has really loved this series, and they've said that it's one of the stronger one of the series, but I just can't get into it. I don't know why. But that is all the negatives I have of this book, and I did actually enjoy it despite what I have just said. I really enjoyed the period setting. To be honest, after watching Bridgerton, I have a bit more of an appreciation and an understanding of what that time period society was actually like. So it was really nice to see a lot of that in this book. And it was very steamy and angsty and frustrating, and a lot of really good tropes in here that I just live for. So there is that as well. The only thing that frustrated me a little bit, and I'm just a bit confused about, is that I feel like over this book and the last one, we know that our two main females, Cordelia and Lucia, they are supposed to be parabatai or becoming parabatai. And we just don't see a lot of interactions between them in this book and the last one. From what I can remember, I could be completely wrong there, but that is my thoughts on Chain of Iron. I am really looking forward to the third one still, so I await eagerly the release of that. And I did actually give this a 4 out of 5 stars despite all of my negatives from before. I did enjoy it. The next book that I completed was an audiobook, and it was The Stone Key by Isabel Carmody. This is the 5th book in the Oberyn series, and it continues the story of Elspeth kind of following her quest to stop a second Great White. So in this book, it started a lot stronger than The Keeping Place did, and there was definitely a lot more action in this book. I do think that there was probably a bit too much politics in this one for my liking. We follow a lot of the rebellion in this one and the outcomes of that, and all of the land stuff. But we also do start to uncover a lot more of what happened in the past, and we start to get a few more answers and also a few more questions about what did actually happen in the past and why Elspeth is on this really great long journey. Romantic subplots are the reason that I live for these books, and there was so much love and tragedy and loss in this book that I really enjoyed, and that was really nice to, experience in this book, and I'm so here for that angst and the heartbreak. I do also really like that Elspeth broke away from some of the characters in this book a bit more. The next one that I talk about, I will just completely contradict that statement, so we'll get there. But for The Stone Key, I did really enjoy it. I really enjoy how descriptive Isabel Carmody's writing actually is. She's got a really nice balance of being descriptive and helping you to kind of understand the world without overdoing it, and then without underdoing it. So she kind of hits that perfect mid-balance really well. And listening to it also makes it a lot easier to absorb those and to imagine it in a different way. So Stone Key, I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book was a physical book, and it was the kind of one of the most anticipated ones that I had to read for this year. It was a lot of people's favorite last year, and it's Get a Life Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This story follows Chloe Brown, who really breaks the mold of your typical heroine or main female in a story. She is a Black woman who does suffer from chronic pain, and we sort of follow her story as she realizes that she doesn't have too much of a life, and then writes herself a list of things that she wants to complete. And then naturally we have this really great love-to-hate romance with the guy who is the building supervisor of the unit block that she lives in, that she moves into. And our story kind of kicks off from there. Now, everyone loves this book, and I didn't love this book. I did have a moment there where I thought that it was me and I was getting really, really jaded about books and contemporaries and romances and my expectations of them. But after really sitting down and thinking it over, oh really? I did enjoy reading the book. It may also have been tainted by the fact that I did have my wisdom teeth out and I was struggling through that at the same time as reading this book. I just feel like, I don't know, I just didn't love the story. Like, I feel like even if I watched it, I probably still would have been like, I could take it or leave it. The things that I did like about this book was that it was easy to read and that there was representation and people of color and it was all very diverse. Like, that's what I did like about this book. And also that it gives you a slice of real world romance with a very stable and healthy relationships. The things that I didn't like about this book, every second word was a swear word and I felt like it was a bit excessive. The whole book felt like it was just leading up to sex. A lot of other books do that as well, but this one felt, I personally felt like the main point of this book was sex. The side characters felt a little bit underdeveloped. I know they have their own books, but it really just focused on the two main characters. And the steamy smut in this book felt very abrupt. And that's kind of my main thoughts on Get a Life, Chloe Brown. I didn't love it. I gave it a 2.5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was another one that I read when I was like comatose on the lounge recovering from getting my wisdom teeth pulled out. And it was A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. I picked this up because everyone that I follow on BookTube says really good things about this book and the paranormal romance aspect of it. It's a story that follows witches and vampires and demons in a world where they're not supposed to interact. This story follows Diana, who is a witch, and Matthew, who is a vampire. Diana and Matthew are both historians and scholars with one of these universities. I can't remember which one it is. They live in a world, obviously, where the magical creatures are not supposed to interact because it draws too much attention from the humans. This book has a very dark academia vibe. There's a lot of description of scholarly articles and things that they're doing in terms of that. Deborah Harkness is also a scholar, which is probably an explanation as to why that is. There was a lot, okay, for someone who could only eat mushy foods and soft foods, there was so many really nice food descriptions in this book. And it just made me sad because I couldn't eat any of it. And I did really enjoy the dark academia vibes, like those like library, paranormal, everyone's drinking wine all the time. Those vibes were amazing. And it's probably why I kept reading this book. I will start with the relationship dynamics. So Matthew and Diana have a very interesting relationship dynamic where they're both quite powerful and they're both quite headstrong. And so obviously with this paranormal thing, the vampires have this really overprotective, overbearing nature. And so naturally Matthew has that for Diana, but she is a very independent woman and doesn't want any of that. So I really didn't like Matthew's side of that. It felt a bit possessive, but in saying that, they were actually quite equal in terms of their power and their balance in their relationship. So that was quite nice. I was really intrigued by the magic system in this world, and I found that the plot got a lot stronger as the story developed and you got later into the book. The world was really rich and really robust, and there was a really big emphasis again on like the historical component, but then also science and how that plays into the different races and their histories throughout the world. The story was a bit ridiculous. Like things that would just seemed really, I don't know, random kept happening, and it just kind of kept one-upping itself in like ridiculousness in a way. And I also found that things would just happen without much explanation. Like there's a bit at the end where 2 random people appear and there's no explanation as to why or how, and that's like kind of mentioned a bit later on, but not really. But I am really glad that I picked this up. I think it was a perfect transition. It's when the like weather started getting a bit colder here, so it was a really nice transition from that like warmer weather into that cooler weather with the dark academia vibes. I don't know, it felt very autumn. I loved it. Given all of like the limitations and some of the things, I actually only gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars. Following on from that, the next book I picked up was Eleanor, Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. This book follows a girl named Eleanor who is a bit quirky. She works in a company as a finance person, and she has this interaction with an old man who kind of collapses in the street, and one of her co-workers, the IT guy. And their story kind of unfolds from there. This is a book that deals very heavily with trauma, domestic violence, and just mental health in general. There's quite a strong presence of suicide at one point as well. So that is a trigger warning for anyone who wants to pick this up. I kind of struggled at points. So for context, I'm a mental health worker. So this book kind of felt like work at times. I kind of got around that by actually reading it at work in my lunch breaks. So it was kind of nice to balance that out. But I will say there was quite a good representation of therapy in this book at some point. It's not really a spoiler, but it felt very real and not very dramatized, which was quite nice and realistic. I really enjoyed reading from Eleanor's perspective. She's got such a different view on the world. It was kind of almost characterized by someone that's on the autism spectrum, but it wasn't explicitly stated. And people who present with autism and people who present with trauma actually do overlap quite a bit. So there is that in there as well. And I thought, again, going back to Chloe Brown, I was having a really bad run with contemporary novels and adult fiction, but this book actually reinstalled my faith in the genre. The writing was fantastic. The description of the scenes at times was very vivid, which I actually am so surprised that this is Gail Honeyman's debut novel because it is fantastic. Her writing is great. But yeah, I rather enjoyed this book and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read, I'm not going to talk too much about because I have a reading vlog about it. I'll leave it linked in the description, but it is Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. I did read this and then jump straight into the TV show. So I have a whole vlog about this. I will leave the link to it in the description if you want to know my in-depth thoughts about it. But I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars. And the last book that I completed was an audiobook, and it was The Sending by Isabel Carmody. This is the 6th book in the Overview series. Again, we follow Elspeth on her journey to stop the next Great White. This book is probably up in my 2 favorites of this series, so Aisling and this one. They're both very, very good. The pacing in this one is fantastic. There's a lot of action at the start. There is a sort of a slower bit at the end, and this is where I'm going to contradict myself because since Elspeth kind of split from the main kind of cast of characters, it got a lot slower and it felt like I was reading her trek through the mountains for several hours. Yeah, that was a bit dry at the end, but the start of the book and the end of the book were very, very well paced. So there's just that one little bit and really getting used to the having Rushton and then losing Rushton heartbreak. It's so present in this book. The angst is there, the tragedy is there, it's all there. We also start getting a lot more answers in this book to a lot of the bigger questions. Things start getting revealed, being the second last in the series. I will say that of all of the books that I have re-listened to in this series, I think that this is the one that I remember the least about. And I have a suspicion it's because in the past I have actually read the other 5 twice, but this one only once. And the only thing I did remember is that we landed on a very large cliffhanger. So I'm really glad that I was able to jump straight into the Red Queen after this. But in saying that, I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. And that is all of the books that I read in April. It was quite a big month for reading for me. I'm a bit slower in May. I have a lot of other things on my plate. For one, the bird that keeps yelling in the background, that one. Again, there's vlogs to explain all of that. But let me know in the comments down below what you read in April, if you have read any of the books that I have read this month, because I would love to talk to you about it and talk through my thoughts. But as I said, anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye. They are supposed to be becoming. They are supposed to be becoming. How does words?